You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hey, people-centric leaders. We are excited to join you today to talk about an incredibly important topic that is getting increased popularity amongst our clients and people that we work with to learn, and it's this concept of emotional intelligence. Now, some of you just were listening to this podcast, and some of you might have rolled your eyes of saying like, oh my gosh, you're just going to have to be calmer. You're going to have to be more cool and collected and don't let your emotions take off with you. But I'm telling you, that's not what this means. That is not what we're trying to say to you. So, hey, come in with this open mind, because what we have found is that this is incredibly effective thing for individuals to work on to improve your effectiveness in everything that you do in your life. And I think that when people learn more about it, they're a little bit surprised about what it is. You think you know what it is, but you don't know what it is. And it's an area that everyone on this call, everyone listening to this podcast, and everyone sitting next to you, and everyone that you interact with could learn a little bit about, because all of us have low EQ moments and high EQ moments. And we're going to talk about what is EQ, what is IQ, what the heck is all this thing. And so joining us, fresh off the road, first of all, fresh off the road doing these topics is Philip Herzog. Philip, we just got back from a trip to Kentucky and up to Illinois, working with a couple of people on this topic.
Yeah, it's like EQ madness season, March Madness, January EQ madness. We have been talking about emotional intelligence, and it is an incredible topic because one of our presentations, the head of HR for this whole division, brought up that there's research that shows those with high EQ are 400% more effective at predicting professional capabilities later on. The study from Berkeley said they're 400% more likely to be successful in their careers when they have high EQ, which speaks to your point. It doesn't mean you are always perfect at what you do, but it does make a difference when you learn how to do it well.
Yeah, 400% more effective than the IQ at predicting career success.
Exactly.
Right?
That's
yeah,
right.
So it's an interesting study, and that PhD, that we've heard of that study at Berkeley. It's a very unique study because they're literally following like 1,000 people, I think, over 40 years.
Yeah,
it's and ongoing. So they've committed. It's like multiple generations of researchers following people, charting everything about their life, what they do, what they eat, where they come from, how much money they make, what happens to them, all the things. And they're looking for like what predictors lead to like a happier life. And what they're finding is like one of the biggest predictors so far that they can find of a person's success is EQ, is their emotional intelligence, which is pretty powerful. And then IQ is not a very good predictor of success, which is good because you can't fix that. We talk about how you can improve your EQ, but you can't fix stupid. So if you're listening to this and you're just dumb, I'm sorry, we can't help you. We just can't help you. You can't fix stupid. Diana, I see you're making a face as I say that. Diana Royalty's with us here too. Diana, can you fix stupid, and how? Go.
I mean, no, I think you're right. You can't fix stupid, but I wouldn't have said it that way. I probably would have, I don't know, been like, maybe you could learn. You can learn. People can learn. I don't know. You gotta kind of wanna. That's what I'm gonna say.
You gotta kind of wanna. I could see Diana cringe when I said it. You can't fix stupid. You just can't fix it.
Yeah. Also, this is how I know I could not go into research, because they just like followed people for 40 years and didn't intervene. I would be like, hey man, let me help you fix your life. I don't know. I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done it that way.
You're following them up and they're like, are you sure you want to do that? Like, but I guess we're not going to say anything.
Right? You wouldn't. Yeah. How do you not say anything?
I just envision every time you go to do something stupid in your life, like the person behind you like clicks their pen and gets ready to write something down. And you're like, what? Why are you about to write that down? Is that going to be a good write down or a bad write down?
I would have to like do the cough, like, you don't want to do that. Don't do that. Yeah. Bad choices. I don't know. I don't think I could handle it. I could not be in research, apparently.
That would be strange to sign up for that study and have these white coats following you around all the time. It would feel like that. I'm sure it's not like that, but we imagine like these researchers just following you around and you go and, I just envision like you're in high school and you're in the cafeteria and you go to talk to somebody who you think and they're like sitting behind you going like, no, not that one. Don't talk to, don't talk to that one. That's our research shows that you have only a 10% chance of success here. You have an 83.2% chance of success if you go over there. And that would be a better relationship for you. I can just see all the data that they have. That would be kind of weird. Well, let's get into this concept of emotional intelligence. So first of all, let's start off by what the heck is emotional intelligence? What is it really? And what is EQ?
Well, the way we talk about it, emotional intelligence is the ability to perceive and manage your own emotions and the emotions of others. And what I love, when we were in Kentucky, we were with a manufacturing team is a very physical job. There's a lot of people on that floor who are ingrained in like being around a machine most of the day. And a lot of them were going to be a part of this workshop we were doing in the evening on emotional intelligence. And every time they saw me, oh my gosh, we love People Centric. What are we talking about today? Emotional intelligence. And to Don's point, at first, I was expecting maybe a few more, but every single time someone heard the topic, they said, "Oh, instantly, we need more of that." And they were very genuine about it. They were like, "We want that. That sounds great. We want more of that." And they really leaned into it. And one of their groups asked the question, "What's the difference between perceiving and managing?" She said, "I can perceive a lot of emotions, but then managing them, that's where it's hard, both for myself and others." So a lot in emotional intelligence.
That's a lot in, and you talk about perceiving and managing. So the difference is perceiving, can you detect that the emotion is there? Can you detect that it's present? And it's funny because as you're sitting here listening to this podcast, I'm sure, or watching us on YouTube, I'm sure that you are very chill and relaxed, right? You're probably not stressed out specifically about anything. So your mind is probably in a state where you're listening to this and going, well, of course I can read other people's emotions or perceive my own emotions. Of course I can perceive those things. But the truth is, and what the research says, is it's actually a little bit challenging sometimes to know your own emotions and know the emotions of other people, especially if your own emotions are being triggered at the same time. As your emotions flood over you, you have a lesser perspective of what you have. Your perception of your own emotions and other people's emotions is impacted. So if you're getting mad, you might not be sitting there thinking, wow, it seems like I'm really upsetting Diana right now. And maybe I should be careful about how I upset Diana and what we do next. Your emotions are just going mad, hurt, fight, do this, do that. You get lost in those emotions. So that's the perceive. And then how you act next is the other piece of it. What do you do with the emotions? So when you feel the emotions, what do you do with them? So it's kind of like sometimes it's divided into 4 different areas, right? It's understanding and perceiving your own emotions. So do you know when you get angry? Can you tell? Can you tell when you get sad? Can you tell as you get sad, while you're mad, whatever it is happening? Do you know that that's coming to you? The second quadrant of that could then be, now do you know what to do with that? So if you are mad, do you know what to do when you're mad? And when I say know what to do when you're mad, I don't mean just follow whatever your heart is telling you to do when you're mad, because your heart is telling you to stomp off, hurt somebody, be upset, do the things. But can your brain kick in, and can your brain tell you, okay, I'm upset right now, so I need to be careful about how I respond, or I need to know why I'm upset. I need to be able to interpret that, and I need to figure out how to manage myself through that. Then you go into the third area of the quartile where you start perceiving other people's emotions. If you're talking to somebody, can you tell that they're getting upset? Can you tell that they're feeling sad? Can you tell if they're feeling anxious about something? Because if you can perceive that, then you can move into the fourth quartile of that, where you can say, okay, now not only can I perceive it, but I'm going to act differently based on how you're responding. I'm going to customize my communication to you depending on how you're responding to me to make me most effective. That's the 4 quartiles of that. So why is that so powerful? Those 4 skill sets sound really obvious. And again, you're all sitting there very calm right now. So in our minds, if we ran through some scenarios, which we'll run through some scenarios, you will know what the right answers are when you're calm and you're not in the state. But why is it so powerful to be able to perceive and manage the emotions of yourself and others? Why is that such a predictor of success?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons that's a predictor of a success, but also I don't think any of those things are actually easy to do. I think I think stating it is super easy, but if I'm just the first part, identifying your own emotions, I don't think most people are actually good at that. I think that is not something that is generally an easy thing to do. Can I recognize when I'm mad? Sure. Can I recognize why I'm mad all the time? No. Um, I heard this thing from Simon Sinek one time. He was like, "There's a scale on how people react from 1 to 10, right? 10 being really elevated, 1 being normal, logical, fine." And he said, anytime it's above a 5, it's not about the thing you're talking about. So I could be like, "Hey Don, I would really like you to go do this thing," and if Don reacts above a 5, he's not reacting about the thing itself. He's reacting to 20 other things. So I think just that, like, identifying your own emotions and why you're feeling that way is just not an easy thing to do for us as humans. And it may take a lot of thought before you can get to that. So just like baseline number one, hard to do.
It is hard to do. It seems easy again when you're sitting here calm, but it's very hard to do, especially if you overreact, right? Is kind of what you're saying. Like an overreaction is an over a 5 or whatever. So it's like, why did that upset you so much? If you never know why that upset you, it's going to be very difficult for you to manage it, because then you're just reflecting on the emotion itself, which once you're reflecting in the emotion, you get lost in that. You're not thinking clearly as well. Where if you can see the thing and you can see it coming, then you can anticipate it and you can kind of plan for it. I think about that, and that works both ways. I can think about when I was early in my career, there was another engineer that I used to work with a lot, and he and I frequently had disagreements about things. We frequently disagreed, and sometimes it felt like we would fight just to fight. And I can remember one day I was driving into work and we had a meeting first thing in the morning, and I was thinking about that meeting, and I knew he was going to fight me. I knew he was going to fight. I mean, I'll call him Jeff just to make up a name. Jeff's my son's name, but he wasn't there, but I'll just make it up. So I would go into work thinking like, I'm going to go into the meeting and I'm going to present this argument that of what we should do next. And Jeff is going to start peppering me with questions. And he's going to fight me about what we're going to do. He's going to disagree with it. He's going to try to make me look stupid. I'm going to have to fight him and all this stuff. And I'm thinking through the meeting of what I'm going to say. But as I'm playing it through in my head, what I did not realize is I'm triggering emotions in myself. I'm triggering anger. I'm triggering anxiety. I'm triggering all that. So I walked into the meeting with those emotions already triggered, already cooking inside my head. My brain is working differently now, and I didn't even recognize it. So I start the presentation very calmly, and anybody in the meeting wouldn't have seen it. I would have been able to present it like without being able to show that. I'm talking. Jeff asked a question, and the question that Jeff asked was a basic question. It wasn't even a hard question. It was, or an attacking question. He just asked a basic question like, well, how much do you think that's going to cost? And it triggered me. Like, it was like, Jeff, you are always pushing back, and you know what? Maybe you should find out what it costs. Maybe you should work on this if you want. I mean, I jumped all across the table at Jeff and like went after him. And the rest of the people in the room were like, what is happening? What is wrong with you? Why did that happen? That's an example of low EQ. That's low, which intelligence quotient or emotional quotient, which is what EQ stands for. That's an example. And Diana, I think that goes back. So if I don't understand why did I respond so strongly to that? I have had to learn to catch myself going into a meeting to plan it, not to also project what I think the other people are going to do. I found that for myself, I'm going to project what I think they're going to do and not react to what they're going to do before they even do it.
Yeah. And then there's the flip side of that, right? Let's say Jeff is like, I'm working on my emotional intelligence. I'm trying to manage other people's emotions. And he goes into it and he says, like, I don't know, how much is that going to cost? And you launch at him. That's very unpredictable. And so, how you manage other people's very unpredictable emotions is also not easy to do, right? Like, this whole concept is not an easy thing to do.
As you were talking, I was thinking the other side of it too. I think some people in their mind, they assign management as suppression. Like, oh yeah, no, I'm just not going to admit or acknowledge that any of this is going on, right? I'll remain perfectly neutral. But that also doesn't work because there is a breaking point where eventually there's enough steam in the kettle, right? It's got to get let out somehow, which I love that example too, Diana, of where, well, that's probably when people respond above a 5. Like, I'm finally calm until like, no, I am going to come across the table now because, I can't handle you anymore.
Yeah, and I like the point that you made about how it's complex because you're both doing it. So there's multiple, it's happening amongst everybody all at the same time. So if Jeff is sitting there and I suddenly just leapt across the table, do you think that's going to impact how Jeff approaches the next meeting? Right? He's going to approach it very cautiously. He's going to approach it maybe antagonistically. So I mean, the relationship, like what creates a moment where two people know they're going to fight every time they run into each other? And it's this. It's them not responding. So one of the things we like to say is it is easy to have high emotional intelligence when the other person is also exhibiting high emotional intelligence. It's easy to do that. It is harder to do that, or maybe I'll say it this way, it's easy to show low emotional intelligence when the other person is showing low emotional intelligence. If they go low, you want to go low, right? If you sit there and you say, well, I would really like to settle this conflict with you, Diana, and Diana says, your mama, and I start getting upset, like, why are you saying that? That's why did you bring my mama into that? That's weird. And then I might go low too and start to say, well, yeah, well, your dog is dumb or something like that. Like I'd do a cheap shot like that. Diana, do you care
Very
to respond?
unfair for you to bring our dirty laundry here. I don't appreciate it. That is exactly how we fight every time. So, not cool, man. Not cool.
And Brock is probably sitting there listening. And so I'm sorry for
And Brock
Diana's
is
dog.
very hurt by saying that he's dumb and ugly. What'd you say he was? Dumb, ugly? He's neither of those
I
things.
thought I heard
Wow,
him
you
push
added
his.
stuff to what I said. That's
Yeah, he
interesting.
pushed his nope button. I heard it in the background. He ran over to that button and hit nope.
He said, Uncle Don, jerk.
Yep, that's right.
That's right. That's what he said. Yep.
That's what it's and dogs have emotional intelligence apparently now. That's what we're learning from all of this. So so this impacts us, like this impacts on a day-to-day basis. Like it impacts us like we do a series of skits for people, which are real fun to watch because we're tremendous actors as we do things. But we'll do skits of like somebody comes and tells you they're having a bad day at work or something, and there's different responses that you might have. Like examples of some responses that we'll share is like somebody will say, hey, I'm having a bad day at work and my job is, and they'll complain about their job. And some people will come in and say, well, then you should quit that job. You should quit that. You should leave that job in a heartbeat. And we point out that that's a low EQ response. So, I mean, that's as an example. So like let's talk about that specifically. Like, why do we say that's a low EQ response?
Okay, first of all, I want to say that I see this happen on Facebook all the time. Like someone will complain about something and then they like people immediately jump in and like complain with them. I don't know. It as a coach, it drives me crazy. But this is a low emotional intelligence response because they don't have the context to understand all of the other things that are happening. And the higher emotional intelligence response would be like, well, let's talk about it, right? Let's tell me more about this. Talk about this. Do you want advice or do you want to just vent for a minute, right? Figure out what they need in that moment. But the like immediate jump in and say, you should quit. You're right. Your boss is stupid and your job sucks. I think that just feeds the fire of the low emotion instead of elevating them to something more productive.
Yeah. So I read an article about like why do people do that on Facebook? Why do people, if somebody complains about something, why do people throw logs on the fire? And it's a low EQ response because what happens when you do that is you feel good about yourself. It actually gives you a little bit of a dopamine shot. If you go in and say like, oh, you're complaining about your job, well, you should quit that job because you feel like you're inspiring them. But what you're focused on is not them, you're focusing on you. So it's a low EQ response because you're feeling an emotion. You're feeling elation, happy. I'm the savior now. I'm helping you with this thing. But you're not focused. You're not mentally thinking about what's the impact of what I'm really saying. Should that person really quit their job? I'll tell you, most of the time when people complain about their job, no, they should not quit their job. Should they? Sometimes, yes. Sometimes they should. But as Diana said, you don't know enough about the situation. And the reason that you're saying it, you're not consciously thinking this, but the reason you're saying it is because it makes you feel good, not because of how it impacts other people. So that's a good example. We also shared the example of like somebody comes to you and says, oh, my grandmother passed away yesterday, and says that. And the conversation goes on and says, well, how old was your grandmother? Oh, my grandmother was 87 years old. Oh, well, that's terrible. Well, at least you had 87 years. That's great. Those kind of responses. And there's a lot of studies on grief. Like if you've lost somebody close, think about somebody coming to you and say, well, at least you had that long with that. That's a low EQ response. Why is that a low EQ response?
Yeah, I think this is one our team always gets into. I think when you're uncomfortable and you don't know what to say, even though probably everyone has lost someone close to them. So I've seen many people who even recently lost someone they also loved after a long time use that same line because they're just like, well, I don't know what else to say. I think it kind of gets you moving along faster because I don't know what this person needs from me. I don't know what they want. I'm just going to say something that feels kind of nice and I'm uncomfortable. So I'm going to shut this down so we can move forward. I think it's kind of both of those things, discomfort and efficiency. And I think maybe if people had options in their mind that were better, like, wow, that's terrible. That sucks. I'm so sorry. I love you. I'm here for you. Whatever that might be. If you had like some simple go-tos, that would help. And whether it's your grandma or like a professional pain that happens, we talk about that too. I've seen teams go through really hard things and a leader just say, well, better luck next time. Let's move on, and they really needed to take the time to process the massive investment they've made that's now been lost and to reckon with that.
Yeah, that's another common EQ mistake is to not pick up on the emotion and try to ignore it or try to crash through it. Or you do pick up on the emotion and you try to ignore it and crash through it. And we do that in the skit. We'll play that off multiple responses and say, oh, my grandmother just died. And you're like, yeah, well, my grandmother died too. Anyway, let's talk about what we're going to do next. Like that kind of a response. And that's low EQ as well, obviously.
Yeah, they're like, well, at least she's in a better place now. What are you talking about? Don't say that to me. I want her here with me. I love my grandma. She loved me. I do think that we did a podcast on toxic positivity, and part of that bleeds into that too, right? You can't just like positive over bad things. That's a low emotional intelligence response. If you're just like constantly like, better off, or that just happened, let's move on, or like people need a moment to grieve, like Philip was saying. You need that time to unpack things and process things, and that's another aspect of emotional intelligence, is like the space to understand what each person needs in that moment.
Yeah, we often say, like, to really connect with people and really be able to influence them, you need to meet them where they are. And if they're coming to you brokenhearted down in a hole, you can't just stand from the top of the hole and say, well, when you're ready to come up here, we've got a lot of work to do. You have to crawl down in the hole for a minute. Like, you have to say, like, this sucks. Like, I'm really sorry for you. Like, let's take a moment. And it doesn't take a lot. For those of you who are like business managers, we've had people say, like, why can't I just like leave that stuff at home? Like, let's separate that from work and life and all that stuff. If you can grieve, but grieve on your own time. Don't grieve on my time. And I've heard managers say stuff like that. They say it like, I'm sorry, this is going to make me sound really bad. But I know that more people, even people who don't say that, think that. But the truth is, let's just look at it from a cold productivity business standpoint. Meeting your people where they are and giving them a moment to be human and say, like, I'm really sorry that happened. What can you need? I'm sure she was very close to you. Like, I'm sure that's going to hurt. Like, just like the things that Philip and Diana said, those things help your person to recover faster and connect with you, and are going to make them more productive at the end of the day. Like, you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. On this, you're not fighting, you're not picking business or personal. You don't have to select that side of things. We also talk about another example where you're walking and somebody bumps into you, and then they look at you and say, walk much, or they make a comment to you or something. What's the response? And the response could be where you wave to them, or you yell at them, or you push them back, or you start a fight or something. And those are all low EQ responses. Again, why are those low EQ responses?
Well, because you probably don't really know why that person ran into you, right? You could never know until you ask. So if Philip and I were in the office and he plowed into me, I would immediately assume good intent because Philip and I have a good relationship. And I would be like, hey man, I'm down here. Did you not see me? I'm very short. And so yeah, I think it's also that relationship, right? But if Philip and I didn't have a good relationship and he plowed into me, I'd be like, you're a jerk. You did that on purpose. And he might have just been on cold medicine and had brain fog. I don't know. He probably didn't do it on purpose. But if I don't ask, I don't know. And I think the relationship clouds your reaction. So if you have bad thoughts about this person and think that they're kind of a crappy person already, then you're going to go to a crappy place. If you love them and you care about them and you trust them, you're going to immediately go to a good place,
Yeah. And you have to think about, like, what's the reaction going to get for you? So, I mean, even if it's a total stranger, even if you're just walking in the airport and somebody plows through you or something, you're probably not going to be able to stop and have a conversation of like, excuse me, tell me why you plowed through me. I would like to know so I can determine how I could best react. You have to make a decision in the moment of what's the best outcome next. And you could stop and you could have an argument, you could stop and you could have a fight, you could stop and do all the things. The truth is, in that moment, just like if somebody cuts you off in traffic, right? That happens with everybody, and you get mad at that other person does not know how mad you are. And you chasing them down does not help them to understand how mad you are because all it does is makes them mad. They don't think back, oh, you must be mad because I was mad. I get what you're doing. We don't, that's not what happens. And that spins out of control. And you get two low EQ responses back to back, and it creates all kinds of problems.
It makes me think, I think one of the ways we say it is you have a lot of choice in this. Don will point to his heart and be like, we can respond like with this way, whatever our first heart emotional instinct is, or we can think pointing to his brain, like, or we can use our brain. We can like take the time, and that's probably when we're better. And if you're in a place where you can't think with your brain, pause long enough, walk away, do whatever you need to do to then come back. And the funny example that Diana used is actually something that happened when we were presenting. I thought Don went ahead a scenario on one of our scenarios where we're just talking and he's supposed to be ignoring me. I thought we were then onto the scenario where I like push him as we're walking. And so we're both have different scenarios in mind. Don thinks we're just going to talk. We start this skit basically, and then I push him in front of everyone, and he's genuinely surprised because he's on old scenario, I'm on new scenario. I was wrong. And his response was hilarious because it was such good acting. It was so sincere because he genuinely was shocked. Like, why are you pushing me in front of all of these people? And I'm like, what's going on? Da, da. And we realized what happened. And a very emotionally healthy response. We laughed. He could have gotten really upset. He could have hit it. Like, it's a little embarrassing, but not like that terrible or anything. And we kind of like made it. It was kind of a funny moment, and it worked. It showed, wow, like this is how EQ works. And it's kind of, I think, the difference emotional intelligence. If you're only thinking about yourself, you have a lot of main character energy and you feel like you're in the story, you don't have a lot of influence. But a high EQ, I think, really gives you the ability to either be a very healthy observer, like, wow, someone pushes me in the airport, like I can walk on. My story does not have to be defined or intersect continually with them. Or even better, you get to write the story, which I think is when managing comes in. Like I can actually manage my own emotions moving forward. And then also I can help you with influence manage your own too. And so just if you can take a little back seat, and I think I get lost in all this myself when I'm like main character energy, thinking more about myself than others, right? Like it's the managing and perceiving others part of this that, to your point, Diana, none of this is easy. But that part, the more you can focus on that, I think it helps you better circle back to regulating yourself.
I like what you said, Philip. This is not altruistic in terms of like a concept. A lot of times people think, well, yeah, you should just be nicer to other people because it will make the world a better place. Yes, great. That's fantastic. But the reason that we talk about this is because of the empowerment component of being people centric. You are taking the choice. It's like Philip said, if you go low EQ, then other people could do something where they could pick a fight with you. If there is a way that I can pick a fight with you where all I have to do is come say the wrong thing to you and you're going to fight me over it, then you are not empowering yourself. You're giving up your power to me. You're giving that power. I am sure there are a lot of people in prison right now who, if you ask them what happened, they're going to tell you it was something somebody else did that put them in a situation that was bad. They gave up their power. And that's a low EQ response for a lot of people. And it's not just people in prison that do this, by the way. If you're listening to this, you've probably heard lots of people who have said that they've challenged themselves with EQ, or you're probably listening to yourself saying you've been impacted by a low EQ. Side note, I'm pausing because FedEx is here. We'll just pause for.
Yeah, you want
Actually, we're pausing. We're putting a little break in here for a second. We'll come back.
We'll come back.
He may not be coming to me, but I'm going to go out and see if I can catch him. Hang on.
Okay. Yep.
Sorry, he's checking real quick, but he's like, I don't think I have it anymore. He's like, it's not on my truck. And I said, well, so they're going to deliver it to the uh, Walgreens or something. And he says, well, I can check on the name and make sure. Oh, he might have it. He's walking over here with something that looks like it. Hang on. Yeah. Look what I have. Did it.
Yes. Oh my
Yay.
gosh.
He goes, I do, because I told him, I said, it said to deliver to the Walgreens. He goes, wait a second. And he goes, I deliver to the Walgreens. So he went to look for the Walgreens shipment and he looked at it and he goes, yeah, I found it. Here it is.
Yes. That's so
I said,
exciting.
sorry, man. I tried to get online and change it. He goes, dude, our online system is the worst thing I've ever seen. He goes, I hate it. He goes, no, it doesn't work. It tells you the wrong stuff. He was like, it's terrible. I'm like,
Okay. He knows. He
yeah,
knows.
why would FedEx have a good online system for shipping stuff?
Hey,
Anyway,
the crazy part is though, a few years ago they did. They had the absolute best.
that's what the guy that worked with, I sat next to on the plane said, and he told me why it changed.
Best. Yeah, they
It's
had the
like,
yeah.
okay,
Anyway,
FedEx.
okay, let's pause so that it's easy to edit all
We'll
of this
pause.
out.
Well, yeah. And so we're going to jump into kind of talking about like how do you change your EQ just briefly, and then we'll wrap it up, right?
Perfect. Yes.
Okay. We're going to pause in 3, 2, 1. So we've talked a little bit about this EQ, and some of you are listening to this going, oh crap, maybe my EQ is not as high as I thought, because you've already thrown some scenarios at me that I do wrong, that maybe I don't handle as well. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about how can you make that better? How can you improve your own EQ? What does that look like?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily like a quick process. I think the first thing is identifying that you may not be as good as you thought you are at this. And then intentionally stating that you want to change it is probably a great next step. And then I think finding someone who can point out the moments when you're not having a high EQ response and remind you in that kind, not right in that moment, but later, that you're not having the best response, I think is super valuable. I have several friends that do that for me. I think everyone on my team would do that for me. Um, yeah, and I think if I asked you, Don, if I was like, hey, I'm trying to improve this part of my emotional intelligence, can you help me? You'd be like, yeah, of course. And you would look out for it for me. Um, but I think you do need someone to point it out because like we're talking about, it's not easy to identify or you would have done that already, right? You kind of need help.
Yeah, you do need help with that. And I mean, it's why we build close relationships with people at work and we try to understand them, because if you do that, then people can come to you and they can tell you, because you might not be aware of it, right? You might not be aware of those moments. I could think of just a couple months ago, Bethany on our team came to me and she's like, hey, that wasn't your best moment. Like she came to me over something that I said in a meeting and she's like, that's not you at your best. And she said it so nicely like that. And it was like, oh, let's talk about it. And I didn't even, it was not on my radar at all. I had not thought about it. Like I just had said something kind of off the cuff. And she's like, that was not you at your best. So then I had to kind of unpack it a little bit of like, what did I say? How did I say it? What was my mindset when I said it? And it was an emotional response to something. It wasn't a massive like, oh, I was really we're kind of using some black and white examples. Sometimes it hits you when you're not expecting it. It might just be something a little bit different, or there's something that happened in a meeting or something that happened to somebody else. It may not be a massive emotional response, but when you respond from the emotion, you're not thinking very clearly, right? We've talked about how we all have 3 brains. The idea that you think either from your reptilian brain, your limbic system, or your neocortex. Your reptilian brain is fight or flight. That's the choice. Your limbic brain is your emotional center. It's your habits, the basic things that you do. And then your neocortex is like your Spock brain. It's your logical brain. And your signals flow through all three of those brains. If it hits the reptilian brain and you're in fight mode, it does not let signals get to your neocortex. You don't think well when you're angry, when you're really upset. If you're blinded by emotions in the limbic system, you don't think very clearly. You're actually hindered. It's like you're intoxicated in a way. So recognizing that when you're there and taking a breath, taking a break, take a moment to let the signals start to get back to your neocortex so you can logically think, what's my best course of action moving forward? That's high EQ response. It's not suppressing the emotion. That's something when we talk, it's like, well, or should I suppress an emotion? Philip mentioned we worked with this manufacturer last week and they had a safety incident that occurred. And the plant manager said, I went out there and I yelled at some people. He didn't yell at people, but he yelled in response. He was like, that shouldn't have happened out here. We can't do that. Somebody's going to get hurt. And he said, in the emotional intelligence training later said, well, I guess that was a low EQ response to it. And we said, that seems like an appropriate response. Someone almost got hurt. If you had just come out and very logically and coldly said, well, someone almost got hurt, so let's go have a meeting and we'll talk about what happened. And everybody was calm. Like then everybody would be like, did you even care? Like, did you even show why that was like that? Or if somebody came to you and said, hey, my grandmother just passed away, and you have a cold response with no emotions to it, like the emotions are not a hindrance. I think sometimes people think that building your EQ is like working around your emotions. No, it's learning how to plug into them. It's learning how to make friends with them, how to say, if I'm angry, what's triggering the anger so I can go back and understand that and learn from it and then react accordingly, react the right direction.
I love that. I love that it's not hiding your emotion or not using them, right? It's using it appropriately. I think that's super good insight right there. I love that.
Yeah, we talk about how leaders, rarely talked about leadership trait is vulnerability. And so sometimes vulnerability means showing some emotion, and it's okay to show some emotion at times. Now, if you're showing that emotion, and if the plant manager had continued yelling and said, now we're going to solve this right now. What did you do wrong? Why did you do that? He recognized that he was yelling. He understood he was in an emotional state, and he did something really smart. Is he said, listen, we're going to circle back up in an hour. Everybody meet in the conference room in an hour. And I asked him, why did you say in an hour? And he said, because in that moment, I felt like I wanted to hurt somebody, or I wanted to slap somebody, or like he said, that was what I was feeling. He goes, I didn't want to start the meeting like that. Now you might be sitting there thinking he wanted to slap somebody. That's low EQ. That's not low EQ. That's how we feel. We all feel like we want to slap somebody sometimes, right?
Especially
We all feel like
at
that.
work.
Wait, what?
No? Oh,
What?
nope.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Diana, not now. We can talk about this later. If you want to talk about this later, we can talk about the slapping. No, Diana's right. We all feel that emotion. So the failure isn't saying, well, I feel that. That's not the failure. The failure is then what do you do with that? So he felt it, and so he recognized it, and he said, it's not to logically go back and triage what happened. I need to be using a different part of my brain. So I need an hour to calm down. And so over the course of the next hour, he didn't just sit there and stew on it either. He didn't sit there and say, I can't believe this person did this, and I'm going to run down there. He just let himself kind of like just calm down. Don't feed the anger, right? He let himself calm down. He broke. And then when everybody came in, I asked everybody in the room, I said, how was he when he came in? He said, he was very calm. He was very serious, but he said, now let's dive into this. What happened? And he went through and he started collecting data. And then we had a very logical conversation about what happened. They figured out about where the areas were where they could have done better and where they messed up. And they came to a conclusion together on what to do next, which brought that team together. So now you're using that emotion that everybody felt for power, because they're going to change something. They're going to keep people safer now because they use that emotion. They're going to take advantage of that incident that occurred and learn from it because they overcame that emotion. If he just yelled and screamed at everybody, then everybody else would have gone like, well, yeah, the reason you don't want to do that is because he's going to scream at you. And that doesn't help you. That doesn't help everybody.
Yeah. Well, and if he often yelled at, screamed at people, right? If he was one of those people who was like, oh, there's a piece of paper on the floor, I'm going to yell at everyone around here. That's not a healthy response either. That's not using your emotions wisely. You're not managing your own, and you're going to make other people try to manage you because of your emotions, and it's unhealthy too. So
It's
he did a
unhealthy.
good job of like properly using the emotions, recognizing his own, and then managing those emotions to help drive behavior. And I think that's good emotional intelligence.
That's good emotional intelligence. It's kind of like saying you can feel. I always point, if you're watching on YouTube, but I'll say what I'm doing. I point to my chest and I'm saying, you're feeling it from here. Emotional intelligence means, though, then you're acting from up here, from your head. So you're feeling it from your heart, but you're reacting from your head. So you can't change how you feel from the things that are hitting you. Initially, you can't. Now, what's interesting, side note, a nuance to this is if you do change how you react to something over and over again, you actually can change how you feel about something. You can actually rewire. We talk about what wires fires on your brain. You can actually rewire your brain. So if you feel blinding rage, like for road rage, for example, if you feel blinding rage and you can't think straight and you react and you drive and you cut the person off and you flip them off and you do all the bad things, like stop. If you can just get yourself to just absorb those emotions and take it and not do anything differently, put some music on, just stop thinking about it. And I know it's super hard to do that. If you practice that several times and do that several times, it will slowly get easier. And it's hard to do, but it will get easier. Your brain will literally re-hardwire the response to it, and you will respond differently to that. So that's it's a lot. What we're talking about here is not like we're giving you like this little trick concept thing that you spend a couple hours on and you're going to fix. This is like a lifelong pursuit for all of us because I don't think we have it all figured out. Diana, you seem to have it together. I don't know. Maybe you got it.
No, I do not. I mean, I do not. In fact, if you remember when I first started at People Centric, I think a lot of people thought that I was cold and unforgiving and aloof. I did not manage my emotions well. I did not identify my emotions. I kind of shoved them down and was very like, I'm going to be logical about this. So I was the person who was like, oh, your grandma died. Are you still going to come to work today? Like, so I've had to work on that like over the years, right? I've had to work on not showing up that way and thinking about how the other person is feeling and recognizing my own emotions. And yeah, it's been, over a decade of progress, but not easy to do.
And I think when you're doing that, my advice is be nice to yourself while you're doing it.
True.
It's really easy to like beat yourself up when you have a bad response. We have somebody that we were coaching that got upset with their team and yelled at their team and lost their cool and called their coach and said, hey, this just happened. And they were really getting, I should know better. I should do better. And they're kicking themselves into getting mad. That anger with yourself and getting mad at yourself is keeping yourself in your limbic region, your emotional side, and you don't solve problems that way. It's like take the lesson, learn from it. We all screw up. We all do. We all screw up. We all have to. I can think of multiple times where I have practiced dumbassery caused by my dumbassery is the term caused by some emotion or something that I didn't unpack, that I didn't understand where it came from. I didn't even understand it, and I didn't even acknowledge it. I didn't even recognize it. And we do this for a living. Like we help people with a lot of this stuff, but you still hit it for yourself. It's hard to be a human because it changes how you think. Like that's the hard thing about emotional intelligence. So you have to be aware of it almost all the time and work through it. But if you do, as that study says, it makes you so much more effective. It makes you so much more effective. You can use your emotions, become friends with your emotions, and it helps you to figure out how to act to others. It makes you more powerful. It makes you more influential as a leader.
For sure. Yeah.
Right. So we enjoyed this topic a lot. As always, check out our website, check out our other episodes. If you have other ideas that you want to send us, shoot us some topics. We'd love to hear from you. But thanks, Diana, and thanks to Philip for joining us on this episode. And we'll catch you next time on the People Centric Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.